What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In. I'm your host, Mason Cameron at PFF_Mace on Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta at Vishaal_Gupta 95 on Twitter. That is 2 straight weeks and 2 flawless introductions off of the top of the dome. I think we've got a new tradition going. It's week 5. I can't wait to break down the games with you. We have a lot of the games picked this week, so I'm really excited to break into it. I think we only left one of them off the slate, and really, it's just a great game to watch. You don't even have to bet on it. But, of course, as always goes, if we don't hit a game that anybody does want to see, make sure you hit us up in the Discord. But, V, how are you doing? Are you ready to break it down? I can't wait to see what you got cooked up this week.
Yeah, super excited. I think this is going to be a really fun weekend of games. It's going to be a long day of games, that's for sure, because for once, maybe ever, the London game is actually maybe going to be good. We got some good quarterbacks going, so going to have to actually wake up in the morning and watch that one. So it could be a long, long day Sunday, but hey, that's what we do, man. We love it, so can't wait for it.
Not like last week where we definitely both slept through the first game. Absolutely.
Absolutely. We didn't miss anything, too. So
absolutely. And this one is going to be a good one. We do have a long day of games. There's a lot of good matchups and, some good money to be made. I think we have a lot of value on this card, which, it's good because once you get into a month of the season, kind of like where we're at, you have that sample size of like, okay, last year this team was this way. This year they're looking like this. And it really kind of helps us to separate the last sample size from this sample size. And now we can like attack lines a little bit better. Because, last year we dropped a couple, at least I did drop a couple, taking a couple early Denver unders where that made us a bunch of money last year. And that just wasn't the case this year. They go from, one of the best defenses to the worst. So, and speaking of Denver, V, we had a special head-to-head last week.
Yep.
Your Bears versus my Broncos, and wow, what an interesting game that was. The Bears looked great until they didn't. Fell apart late at the end. What did the game end at, V? What did we end up deciding on the line? I know it was a little bit between. It was like 3 and 3.5. So I
definitely think it closed at 3 at most places. So
okay, I think we ended up taking 3, which means that it was a push. Of course it was. So I guess we'll just have to figure out
we
another.
Just take the money line as our tiebreaker. I mean, it was
there
one
we
or
go.
the other. So let's just take money line tiebreaker.
Yeah, there we go. And you hit the nail on the head though, because you called out the Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. to Chicago parlay, and that one hit beautifully. How hilarious that was. But that actually leads us into our first betting breakdown of the night. And that's actually on. Well, you know what? First off, V, I might be jumping the gun. V, what did you take of the Denver matchup? Like with Chicago last week? How did you take that?
I took that game as it's a team that has a razor thin margin for error. Even when you go up big in the early third quarter like that, 28-7, you kind of felt like even if Denver comes back and scores once to make it 28-14, now you just got all this pressure on you because this is a team that does not know how to hold on to a lead because they just don't have much experience doing it, and that's exactly what happened. They go up 28-14, you immediately go 3 and out for the first time all day. Denver comes right back and scores. Now it's a 1 possession game, and then obviously you get a killer turnover in the 4th to tie everything up, and then everything just becomes super tense. So it's just a team that as many times as they can score, it still might not be enough because they just don't have any margin for error to hold on to those leads. And we kind of started seeing a little bit of that last night, but thankfully, thanks to some wacky Ron Rivera decisions, it kind of worked out in the end for the Bears. But maybe a more aggressive coach could have led to another massive comeback for the opposing team.
And that breaks us into our first game of the night, which was the breakdown of the Thursday night game where Chicago looked incredible. And even for the first half, and they started to kind of let it slip in the start of the second half, they still managed to kind of bring it back, hold down the Commanders, which was exactly like you said. Maybe some Riverboat Ron type antics went down. But Bears end up covering 6-point underdogs. They win the money line plus 220. The over on this one, which was somewhere that I saw a lot of value considering how these defensives have kind of played as of recently. 44 and a half. They go over that with 60 total points. Uh, this is just not a game that I expected to turn out this way, if I'm frank, because
Hmm.
like we talked about with the late collapse for the Bear or against the Broncos, and then the way that Washington took Philly into overtime. Now I understand that everybody's like, "Oh, it's a short week. They went to overtime with a tough team." I still didn't expect the Commanders to come out as flat as they did. The whole first half looked like a mess to them. They started kind of getting some stuff going a little bit later, but it was just
Yeah.
too little too late and not enough plays bounced their way in that second half for it to really become competitive in any way. So, but wow, we have to talk about what Justin Fields and DJ Moore did. Yeah. They connected for 8 receptions, 230 yards, 3 touchdowns. Like, how
Yeah.
does something like that happen? Like, where did they tap into this, V? Like, did you see this coming, or was this as much a surprise to you as it was for me?
Definitely a surprise for it to be, kind of all of this good stuff happening when it going directly to DJ Moore. I mean, first of all, it's obviously awesome to see, Justin Fields play incredible 2 games in a row, back to back games with 4 touchdowns. I mean, that's just something you never see out of a Chicago quarterback. So that's, first of all, that's super fun. And I think what's also cool is that he had an awesome game and there were a lot of plays that were left on the field too. I mean, there was honestly 2 or 3 or 4 deep balls that he missed. He just kind of missed guys that if he hit those could have been bigger plays, more touchdowns. So seeing that there were still a lot of opportunities and he still had a good game, I think it just shows you why everybody was so excited about him coming into the season and when he got drafted, because there's just so much upside with him. And when everything is clicking, it's awesome to watch. So, I mean, it's fun. Obviously, it's going to be a week to week thing in terms of talking about his future here. But I think, at this moment, we're just going to enjoy what we have and just hopefully get some more fun quarterback play for the rest of the year.
And it looked so good. It looked like what a lot of, or I shouldn't say a lot of us, but some of us who were higher on the Bears, especially myself, early in the process, giving what they did in the draft and giving what they, did in free agency, I thought that they were going to be a much improved team. Uh,
Hmm.
and then they just didn't come out, didn't play up to those standards. Now, finally putting some stuff together, they look a lot better. Hopefully, that's a sign of some things to come. And
Yep.
maybe we look back in another month down the road and we go, how did this team start 0-4 if they continue to really play as good as they have? Now, the Commanders aren't necessarily a top-notch opponent, but you have to beat the teams in front of you. And that's something that Chicago has struggled with for a long, long
Yeah.
time. And you know what? You got to take your steps one at a time. And they did that. Now, what that means from a betting standpoint, I'm not necessarily going to tell you to go out and bet the Bears to cover this week, maybe, or just moving forward. But when you look at some of the value that they might have, you could definitely attack some of these matchups in terms of like props and other things, even team
Overs
totals.
are gonna, I think, become a lot
Right.
more in play for this team that maybe you wouldn't think about the last few years because it's not a team that necessarily scores points, but I believe they're 5-0 to the over so far this year. So overs
Right.
should continue being a nice play for them.
Right, exactly. Even though the script for their overs has suddenly flipped,
Yeah,
where they were
right,
usually the team on the opposite end, and now they're the ones putting it up. But you
right.
bring up a great point that their point total by game to game is gonna be an opportunity to attack in pretty much every one of their matchups, even against quality opponents. So that's going to be something that's interesting to see moving forward. But so we head
Yeah,
into the rest of the games we've got for the week. And like I said, we hit pretty much all of them. I actually have a pick in this first game just so you guys can wake up to some money. Anybody who's not going to be watching the game, I know V and I are probably going to be up a little bit early for this one. We're excited.
well,
But you get the Jacksonville Jaguars. They are technically the away team. This game being in Tottenham, I think. I don't think this one's in Wembley. I'm pretty sure it's in Tottenham or wherever they play the other games. Um, Bills favored 5.5. Technically the home team, but I mean,
yeah,
if you think about it, the Jags play there so much that it's like
yeah,
they're almost the home team there. Trevor Lawrence is 2-1 against the spread uh, at in the UK since they've drafted him. So, I think a lot of people are going to probably lean that way, and that's the way the narrative's going to go. But how do you go against this Bills team right now, and especially at under a touchdown? I get that the Jags also have the added benefit that this is their second London game in a row, and so they've been out there and they're acclimated to the time change and everything. And the Bills aren't necessarily, but the Bills are a different beast entirely. Entirely. So this, just to put this into perspective, this Bills team, they're averaging, since their week one loss, they're averaging 41 points per game, 11 points per game allowed. And they don't just cover spreads, they've absolutely obliterated them. They are a leading 16.5 points above the against the spread margin. So they're covering by a wide margin. They're playing fantastic on both sides of the ball. As much as we really love Jacksonville, and as they've done, and as they have a great roster, they just haven't really done quite as well with the roster up to this point. Now, Trevor's actually played really well. A lot of people are kind of like, well, where's Trevor? Where's Trevor? Because he's not putting up these fantasy points, these video game numbers. But he's playing fantastic football. He's up there near the top of the league. Actually, I think he's second in big time throws. He might not have all those touchdowns, but he's second in big time throws. He has a very low turnover worthy play percentage. He's playing good football. It's just now he's going to be coming up against one of the toughest defenses that he's going to face all season. And it's tough to keep pace with an offense like Buffalo's. They seem to be clicking everywhere. And I don't know, injuries don't slow them down. It's just hard to really get behind thinking that, given their success in London, I just still don't know that that's going to be enough for the Jags to take. Like we talk about, when you get at a line like 5.5, you're more like looking at a line like 7. I still think 7 is fine. I think a touchdown is about where they're going to be at. V, do you see anything with this matchup that I might be missing here?
Yeah, this is definitely a great matchup. Great London game to wake up in the morning to. It's tough to bet against Buffalo right now. I mean, they're just on fire. It's insane. There's nothing they can do. There's nothing opponents can do right now to slow them down at all. The only thing that's concerning me a little bit right now for Buffalo is they do have a couple injuries right now on defense. Gregory Rousseau has been ruled out for this one, and Tre'Davious White, unfortunately,
Ugh,
went down with another season-ending
yeah.
injury, so they could be a little bit thin in the secondary. We'll see if Von Miller is going to play in this game. I think they're still saying questionable, even though the game is a couple days away. So we'll see what he can do. But even if he plays, it's his first game back after such a long time off. So I don't really think we can necessarily expect a ton out of him. But even with those injuries, you would still expect Buffalo's defense to continue dominating. They still have Matt Milano. They still have a fantastic defensive line. They still just get after you in every which way. The real question is, what can Jacksonville's defense do against Buffalo? And I think this is the game where their defensive line needs to step up. The other Josh Allen needs to continue his success from last week. I think he had a very nice game against Atlanta last week with a sack and I think a forced fumble. Big key though is, where is Trayvon Walker? I have not heard this guy's name once this year. I mean, it's like, if you ask diehard fans who the number one pick was in last year's draft, they would have to pause and think about it, because it's not a name that just pops off the top of your head. He's not really doing anything right now. I mean, we really need to see him come to life and start playing the way he should be playing as a number one overall pick. And if they can do that and he can kind of activate that defensive line, that's when Jacksonville is going to start becoming more competitive and they're going to become a legit playoff and Super Bowl threat. So that's what I'm looking for in this game, is what can Jacksonville's D-line do in this one to hassle the Buffalo Josh Allen.
Yeah, and you're right. In the Josh Allen versus Josh Allen story is talked about a lot, but that matchup that he's going to face with Deion Dawkins this week is going to be a big one, because
Yeah.
Deion Dawkins is one of the best tackles in the league, and Josh Allen's finally coming off a really solid performance. He had a 21 plus pass rush win rate. But you're absolutely right. Walker has not done anything, and frankly, it was a questionable pick when they did it. Even nobody pushed back on that. It wasn't a questionable pick. Everybody questioned, why are they taking this guy? And they see in Jacksonville circles were like, oh, well, they know something that we don't know. Well, we're this far in, and he still has yet to pop in any
Mhm.
single game. And this year, he's been especially bad. Hasn't really produced much in terms of total pressure. Something's got to give at some point. And if that's going to be their big investment on the defensive side of the football, they're going to be in trouble for a while. And this team's going to have to run off of what Trevor Lawrence can do. But frankly, I can't wait to watch this one happen. I haven't been this excited for a London game in a while.
For
So,
sure.
where'd my cursor go? Oh, there it is. All right, next game we have on the list is another actually really interesting one, even though on paper it's not like the best teams in the league, but we have Tennessee heading into Indy, and Tennessee's 2.5 point favorites on the road. I kind of get it, but then again, they've been bad on the road. They've been really bad on the road, and their defense is not terribly good. So I'm leaning on the side of Indy in the points here at home. You actually like part of the game total and some of the props in this one, and we'll get into that in a second. What I'm leaning towards for this game, though, is that where are we in the disconnect with odds makers that Indy is the same team they were last year? What we're seeing with Indy is they're playing better defensively. They're stopping the run at a pretty high clip. They have a kind of a top to middle of the range EPA per play allowed in stopping the run. And then when we look at the offense, yes, Anthony Richardson, sometimes he misses balls that just you're like, how did that happen? Sometimes he can throw darts. But what I think we come into is that potentially the Colts are getting back their best player. Now, all the Jonathan Taylor talk, you know, there's the talk of maybe he was faking an injury. Maybe there's too much, strife in the locker room there. But he's good. And then potentially getting back their best player is way more than enough to tilt this in their favor. What are you seeing with this matchup, though, V? Because I really like where you're sitting with the over there potentially. And I know you have a nice little prop that you're going to kind of stick in there too. But what are you seeing with this matchup?
I'm seeing a game that might be sneaky, really, really fun. I think this could be one of the more exciting games in the early window. I think there could be quite a few points, and I think it could be a bit out of bit of a shootout in this game. So that's why I like the over 42.5. That seems really, really low. Indianapolis has allowed the 11th most points per game this year and the 6th most yards per game through 4 games. Their secondary has not been good at all. They've allowed the 5th most passing yards per game at 264 passing yards per game. One of their main contributors on defense, Dalius Flowers, was put on IR earlier this week. He played 99% of their snaps at cornerback so far this year. So now the Colts are going to have to rely on rookie Julius Brents and second-year player Darrell Baker. That doesn't sound like a good situation for them, especially when you're going up against somebody like DeAndre Hopkins, who I like to go over his prop total of 53.5 receiving yards. He's only averaging 54 receiving yards per game this year. It's been definitely a very slow start for him, but he's still uber talented, and I think this is going to be a game where Ryan Tannehill should be looking for him often in this game, given how banged up and how bad Indianapolis' secondary is. On the flip side, Tennessee's defense has been pretty solid so far this year, but the two dynamic quarterbacks they played this year, and Justin Herbert and Deshaun Watson, have put up 24 and 27 points on them respectively. And now they're going up against Anthony Richardson, who is just a completely different beast in terms of dynamic athlete and just his ability to pick up chunk yards. He's averaging approximately 200 total yards per game. He has 3 passing touchdowns and 4 rushing touchdowns in about 9 quarters of play. He got hurt early in their second game against Houston and then missed their third game against Baltimore. So he's only really played 2 full NFL games so far. And in those 2 games, the Colts have scored 21 points and 23 points. When the total is as low as 42.5, even if they score in the low 20s, I think that's going to be more than enough for this to hit the over, because I think Tennessee's offense will also be able to do their part. So I think this could be a lot of big plays, explosive plays, lots of points in this game, and I definitely like the over on the 42.5.
Yeah, and I said it a little bit earlier, but this has been a team of like different of just home road splits, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
They because you put it perfectly. Herbert and Watson both played well. But Derek Carr had his best passing day of the year too, and his shoulder exploded. So what we're seeing from how they're playing on the road, especially in the secondary, is like this is alarming. And this is an opportunity for Anthony Richardson to actually take some strides. And like you said, it's way too early to make draws on that this guy can or cannot play. So far, we've seen some really quality plays out of him. Some potential is there, undoubtedly. We definitely have to see it get put together, and this might be the matchup that we do see it. So I'm excited to see it also. You are on the side of the over. I love it. I'm on the side of Indy plus 2.5, and we're going to ride this one out. It's actually going to be one of the better games of the early window, which is
For sure.
surprising. The next game on the list, we have the Houston Texans heading into Atlanta to play the Falcons. Houston, it looks like they've actually moved a little bit. They've kind of been going back and forth. +2, +1.5. Really just depends on where you're shopping. You're liking Houston at +2 here. And I could definitely see YV. What's your breakdown on this one?
Yeah, this is maybe the most confusing line of the week for me this week in terms of why in the world would Atlanta be favored over anybody at the moment. But let's first start out with Houston and why I think they're going to be good in this game. You have to start with CJ Stroud. Dude's been awesome. 4 games into his career, he has yet to throw an interception. He has 6 passing touchdowns so far and is averaging 303 yards per game. That's insane. You just don't see rookie quarterbacks doing that like as soon as they step onto the field. It usually takes some time for them to grow into that, but he's doing it right away. You and I were both betting against Houston last week. We like Pittsburgh to cover on the road. And mainly that was because we were very concerned with Houston's offensive line that was missing so many guys. But despite being completely banged up, Stroud was not sacked once last week. And now they're getting a bunch of those offensive linemen back. Laramie Tunsil is still listed as questionable, but I think there's an expectation he's going to play. Titus Howard was activated off the IR. He should be back at right tackle. And then Shaq Mason was is listed as good to go this week. So they're getting a bunch of guys back up front, and now they're going up against an Atlanta defense that has the second fewest sacks in the league with 5, and have just 4 takeaways on the season. I think this is going to be another big CJ Stroud game. I think it's going to be a very good day for that Houston offense. I think there's going to be plenty of time and plenty of room for him to throw the ball. On the other side, I don't really know what to do with Desmond Ridder at the moment. I mean, he's just not very good. He's averaging 86 passing yards per game. He has just 3 passing touchdowns on the season. Atlanta has scored a total of 13 points in their last 2 games, going up against a Houston defense that has allowed just 23 total points in their last 2 games against both Jacksonville and Pittsburgh. This just feels like a complete massive, talent difference on both sides. I just don't understand why Houston would ever be an underdog in this matchup. Also, Atlanta is coming back from London. They don't even get their bye week, and they have to go right back into playing a game. So there's just nothing in this matchup I see that favors Atlanta. So you have to smash Houston in this one.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. My only hesitation with them has been kind of how bad they've been stopping the run from an advanced, metric. They grade horribly run stopping, especially in the interior, where like that's kind of been obviously Atlanta's calling card is their run game, and the interior part of that offensive line is fantastic. Now, there's some talk of like they haven't been quite as good, which is probably fair to say, but this is the game where they have to kind of get that going. Now, frankly, it's always going to be an issue for them not going to get pressure, and I really don't think they're going to get pressure in this one either because Stroud just gets the ball out too quick. The Texans didn't try to make him into a quarterback that he's not, where we were questioning like how well he can improvise when he was coming out. They're like, we don't care if he improvises. I want him to read the play, and I want him to get rid of the ball and do what he does well. And kudos to them and kudos to him because he's absolutely killed it. And he's a treat to watch because they show what well-coached timing can do. And
Yep.
I like watching it. So it's a one for me where it's like, I can kind of see why they're like, all right, we're not going to give Atlanta the full 3 where you traditionally see with like a home team, but 2 is still too many. against Houston, and you could potentially probably get some really good value here at maybe even the money line at 110 if you really wanted to, if you feel kind of like what we do. So I'm right there with you. And it's always so tough traveling back. The fact that they didn't get Atlanta a bye week is like, I
That's
don't know.
rough.
I don't know that I'm trying to think back. I don't know of the last time that we've run across a game where the team didn't get a bye week after
I think
coming
they
back
only
from a bye.
started doing that like last year, because I think the year before, every time there was an overseas game, they always gave the teams a
Right.
bye. I think starting last year, they kind of stopped doing that in some occasions. I'm not sure why. It's pretty unfortunate for those teams.
I'm trying to think. I think you're right. I'm trying to think of who it was, but I can't off the top of my head. We'll have to look it up. But yeah, I'm right there with you. That's a tough draw. Even if it's a home game and you're an East Coast team and you're really just flying across the pond and not also across the country, but that's probably a fumble by the schedule maker there.
Yeah.
Um Next game on the list. I love the Detroit Lions. I love watching the Detroit Lions play football, man. They are so much fun. And it's so awesome that they're like good offensively and they have this attitude. The coaching staff, it leaks all the way through the organization. And I really hope they go far this year. I really do. Now they're probably not going to take down the NFC. The Niners are way too strong, but man, they have to be one of the top handful of teams in the NFC, and I love watching them play. They play host to the Carolina Panthers this week. They're 9.5-point favorites, and everybody is going to hear me talk about the hook again. We love the hook. Getting it under 10 here is just too much of a value. So it's a thing where you talk about with some of the other games, especially like the Giants Miami game, the Giants Dolphins game a little bit later that we're going to talk about, where it's just in it. That line is in just such a tough spot. This is so much more reasonable at 9.5, especially considering how well the Lions are playing on both sides of the ball. They're rushing the passer very well. They're playing well offensively. Amon-Ra St. Brown is on to another phenomenal year. They just look way too good for the Panthers to even manage anything in this one. And it's a tough draw because when you look at this team, they did operate significantly better under Andy Dalton, and we continue to see that they can't score over. I have it written down here somewhere. I want to say it's 17. Oh no, they're scoring just over 13 points a game with Bryce Young under center, the first
It's
overall pick in
terrible.
the draft. So
Terrible.
the theme of like first overall picks, and I liked Bryce Young's talent coming out just as much as anybody, but something's not clicking right now, and they kind of need to figure it out. Part of it is that receiving core there is flat. They really don't have a ton of talent. Adam Thielen isn't playing as bad as as many might think, or as his reputation of kind of on the downslope of his career may
Hmm.
proceed, but he had 7 for like 74 last week. He did the same thing the week before. Like, he's at least playing at a consistent level. It's the rest of the supporting cast that just kind of like letting Bryce down, and Bryce not like attacking defenses in ways that they have in the past. The defense themselves not that good. So when I look at this one, I love Detroit here. It just makes way too much sense. And frankly, this is tough because we always talk about like totals, and like a lot of times it takes two to tango. And if you're only getting like 10 points from Carolina, it could make a 43.5 game total semi difficult to reach.
Hmm.
But I think even at 13, with given how bad uh, the Panthers have been defensively too, I think you could even sprinkle a little bit on the total over here at 44. But I'm all in on this 10 here. V, what have you made of what the Lions have been able to do this year? They're just so much fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely a ton of fun. I think we talked about it after the Thursday night game last week. Is that they've done a really nice job of building this roster outside of Jared Goff. I think we talked a couple times over the years about, is he going to come back to haunt them that they passed on these first round quarterbacks to take some of these other guys like Penei Sewell or some of these other guys in the trenches. I think that is still decision that's going to be thought about, and judgment is still out because as much as we like to hype them up, they still have not necessarily accomplished anything as a franchise. They have not made the playoffs in this new regime that's taken over. I think with the expectations that that's going to change this year, but I think as of right now, it's still, the jury is out. We don't know how this is going to turn out, but I think they've done an excellent job up to this point. When I first saw the line earlier this week, it was like 7 or 7.5 for Detroit, and I was like, that's insane. That's the stupidest line I've ever seen. This should be much closer to 14. If we're being honest, that's how terrible Carolina is. And you started seeing it trend that direction slowly and slowly this week. It's like every day you look up, you're looking at spreads and you're seeing Detroit has gone up by a point or half a point. And it's like, yeah, obviously they're just significantly better than Carolina. Carolina team that could not get the ball in the end zone once offensively against Minnesota. I mean, that is a disaster, whatever is going on there right now in Carolina. I don't know if Frank Reich is a good NFL coach just based on his last two stops, but that's a discussion for another time. The reason this game, though, is not on my card at the moment, I'm still deciding, is because the injury report for both teams is quite long. Starting with Detroit, Amon-Ra St. Brown is doubtful. It looks like he has not practiced this week, so it looks like he can miss this one. Jahmyr Gibbs is questionable to play. Then there's a couple of offensive linemen that are questionable to play. On defense, Brian Branch has already been ruled out, the terrific rookie out of Alabama. Emmanuel Mosley, another one of their cornerbacks, is questionable. So I think there's just a ton of injuries right now. And then for Carolina, they're already down J.C. Horn, who got hurt earlier in the year at corner, and now their other starting corner, Dante Jackson, is questionable. So it's just kind of a mess for both teams, and it feels like Detroit should still dominate this game, but I would not be surprised if this game ended at like 20-13. It's a lower pace game. You're going to give the ball to David Montgomery a lot just because you don't have your wide receiver weapons on the outside. And as good as Montgomery has been in the red zone, he's still not an explosive back. He's not going to give you 7 or 8 yards per carry. He's going to be more like 3 or 4 yards per carry. So if you're going to feed him the ball with Jahmyr Gibbs out, this could be a much slower game script, and I could actually see this game going under the 44 points and being like a 7-point game at the end just because there's not a ton of explosive offense going on. So injuries, I'm going to continue monitoring over the weekend, and if some things go in Detroit's way, I could definitely see myself adding this to my card this weekend.
Oh, I saw that Amon-Ra St. Brown was not active in practice, and I was hoping that it was going to swing because I actually wrote him up on my breakdown of Week 5 for PFF over there as one of my fantasy plays of the week because
Yeah, I was
Dante
looking at it
Jackson.
as an over for one of my props, but then I
Yeah,
couldn't do it given his injury
because
status.
Dante Jackson, he's just struggling. CJ Henderson. Now to hear that he's not actually, I'd actually hadn't checked this afternoon to see if he had continued to practice in the week. I was hopeful that he wasn't going to get downgraded, but man, that's a
Yeah,
huge
has
blow.
not
And you
practiced
know
this week
what?
at all.
In hindsight, you're right. That makes the over there way less interest or way less viable,
Mhm.
100%. So I would lean away from there. But as you also said, as we've talked about, there's still way too much talent around Jared Goff right now that it pushes even with how bad the Panthers have been. Them losing Dante Jackson pushes even another corner on the field. That
Yep,
opportunity could get pushed down to somebody else on the Lions to take advantage of that matchup. But that also makes a lot of questions for this one. But I still like it at 10. And like you said, if the injury report kind of moves in their favor and how much this one has moved away from Carolina in towards Detroit, I think you could see this one move definitely above 10. So you're probably going to want to get in prior to that, at least I
for
would.
sure.
Um, the next one we have on the list here, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, one of the best ever. So truth be told, this was another one that was like very injury ridden. So the Ravens kind of started the week a little bit lower, kind of around like 3 in the favorite, like 3.5, I think it was.
Mhm.
Now they're up to 4.5 in some spots because reports are, Ronnie Stanley should be back. And that's just in time after Myles Garrett absolutely spanked Patrick McCrary. You know, he spanks everybody, frankly. So it's not necessarily Patrick McCarry's fault, but it was definitely outmatched. And they need that back. the receiver injuries tend to be an issue for them too, which is kind of a question and a struggle right now for how you can gauge what Baltimore is going to do offensively. But the Steelers, Trubisky's probably going to be under center. You
And they
have
actually ruled Pickett is going to play in this game, surprisingly, because that
is he
injury looked very bad last week.
okay?
So
Yeah,
he
I was
did
going to
rule
say he
him
looked
out.
really bad. I know that Tomlin did his regular oh well, we're going to see how tough Pickett is, and dude, the guy busted his knee. Like, it's not about toughness, it's about structure in the knee, in the function of the body. So, frankly, even him on a bad knee is kind of a question. If Trubisky has to come in now, Trubisky hasn't been horrendous in his time in Pittsburgh as the backup, I would say. But that's still a huge question for them. And when we look at the trends, the historical trends for the Ravens and Steelers. Now, we talk about this all the time. As the further you go back with trends, the further they muddy the water. But if you just go back to 2020, just the last handful of years, they have 5 straight unders. And I get that last year, you know, Lamar missed both of the matchups, but those games were at 35 and they still cleared them by a touchdown. So when we look at a game like this that's at 38 and it's trending even lower, like it was 39.5 to start the week. It's 38, 37.5 in some spots. This game is going to continue to trend under. Um, Divisional games tend to be hard nosed and they take pride in not letting up. So these two teams are at the epitome of that. I don't see any way, or I shouldn't say I don't see any way, but I think the significant value lies on the under at 38, even though 38 is such a low number. Such a low number. V, do you see anything on this matchup? Are you excited to watch this one? I mean, I like seeing Lamar play regardless, but this might be a little bad blood.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a ugly, bad, old school football game that is not necessarily going to be the most entertaining game to watch. I just don't know what's going on with Pittsburgh. To be honest, that game last week was atrocious. I mean, I don't know how you cannot move the ball at all against a Houston team that, while yes, they have been overperforming, there is still a huge lack of talent on Houston's defense, and Pittsburgh's offense just could not do anything. I mean, Najee Harris did a little bit in the second half, but I mean, even then, that was nowhere near enough for what they needed. This Pittsburgh offense is a joke at the moment. It's not going great for them. Hopefully, Lamar can do Lamar things and make this game a little bit more exciting. But in general, I'm just gonna stay away. I mean, you would think that betting Baltimore to cover the spread would make sense given how bad Pittsburgh has looked. But those trends that you mentioned, especially under Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh, have been way in the favor of the underdog, and I just can't find myself betting on Pittsburgh in this game. I don't care how big this spread gets. They just can't move the ball, and I don't know how you can bet on a team if they can't do that. So I'm just gonna stay away and probably not watch much of this game, to be
Four,
honest.
four's a lot. Oh, I'm not going to. I think that only the real sick individuals are really going to watch a whole lot of this game.
Right.
But four, and we talk about the key numbers at 3 all the time. I mean, we speak about it ad nauseum, but 4 on the road is a really, really tough
Yeah.
draw. And I don't know that the Ravens are that type of team that they're just going to absolutely take control of a lot of their opponents. Now, on paper, they are. They're supremely talented, and I even talked about it early on in the year that this is probably one of the better offenses that Lamar's gonna be playing on in his professional career, and, injuries have just absolutely riddled this team, especially for the last 2 seasons, so it's hard for them to reach that potential, and I think that 4 makes sense if they're kind of, closer to full health and playing well and hitting their stride, but it seems like every week it's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing for them. So
Yeah, the
I'm with
defense has
you.
looked really, really good though last couple weeks, and I think this could be another dominating performance for them. I think Marlon Humphrey might be back for this one, so they're
Yep.
getting some guys back. Roquan has been a beast in the middle for them, so I think it could just be another dominating defensive performance
Yeah.
against a lowly Steelers offense.
Yeah. Their secondary has been fantastic and definitely their strength throughout the season and why they've been anywhere near as good. And I think you're right. I think Marlon Humphrey is back, and that's a big matchup with Pickens because Pickens has been this contested catch guy since coming out,
Mm-hmm.
and he's 0 for I think 9 or 10 now. So that's a tough look. And contested catch numbers tend to vary. They have a lot of variance, but when that's what you've been making your money on, your ability to complete really tough catches with guys on you and just not to be able to do that, that's definitely one of the drawbacks to what this Steelers offense is missing this season for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
I, there's just not much to be made of it, frankly.
Right.
The next game on the slate, we have the New Orleans Saints heading into New England to take on the Patriots. The Saints are minus what? Wait, no, that's wrong on that one. Okay, it looks like books are all over the place on this one. It looks like I have it written down New England -1, but you can
That's what I
also
saw last.
apparently get New Orleans at minus a half .2 at point bet, which shout out to point bet for always having the craziest lines. But so here we are. We're gonna approach it like New England at home -1. But it doesn't really matter because we're looking at the total for this one anyway, as every savvy bettor should be. It looks like it continues to plummet. We got in a little bit earlier. You got it at 40 and I got it at 39.5. It looks like it's coming even into 38.5. Shout out points bet again. So yes, we're leaning towards the under here, and it just only makes so much sense. The defenses in these ones are the strength of the team. Obviously, I don't think we have to sit here and take a lot of time with that. Now, questions around the Patriots with having lost Christian Gonzalez to a shoulder, poor guy, because he was playing outrageously well, especially for such a young player. He was playing well in the system. They go out and trade and get J.C. Jackson. That's going to be a matchup because the question is JC Jackson still the same player from when he left there? Because previously in this Pat system, he was so good. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're looking at how bad he was with the Chargers, healthy scratch the last 2 weeks, and then they trade him. He might come in and play immediately since he's familiar with this system and might be a huge boost in his play. I can't wait to watch that one happen. But otherwise, when we look at these offenses, the questions at quarterback, Carr's obliterated shoulder, Mac Jones being benched last week.
Yep.
I'm not sure what to make of both of these offenses, and I don't think the coaching staffs are right now. So the only thing to do is look at the under here. I'm surprised that it started as high as it did,
For
and we
sure.
were able to get at under 40 because if I were setting this line, I would have started at 37. Like, I'm not really sure where you're getting 40 full points from both of these teams from. What are you seeing from this one, though, V?
Well, I mean, it's especially crazy that you said it at 40 because neither team has scored more than 20 points on offense in a single game this year. Both teams have maxed out at 20 points exactly once. So where are we getting 40 points from? The Saints are averaging 15.5 points per game. The Patriots are averaging 13.8 points per game. I mean, it's insane. On defense, the Saints are allowing 19 points per game, and New England is allowing 24.3 points per game. That seems a bit high, but you have to remember that the Patriots gave up 38 points to the Cowboys last week. But 14 of those points came off of 2 defensive touchdowns for the Cowboys. So that's not something you can count on every week. But I mean, these offenses are horrendous. There's just nothing going on for them at all whatsoever. They can't throw the ball. They can't run the ball. They can't do anything of note. All they can do is play defense. I don't see how any points are going to be scored in this one. As much as I dislike the previous game, Baltimore versus Pittsburgh, this is 1,000 times worse. There is just nothing going on. I don't see any way this can come anywhere close to this total. So, gotta smash the under. Awful,
It,
awful team all around.
it only makes sense. I don't even think we have to continue to beat the dead horse on that one either, because I don't think anybody anywhere is gonna kind of disagree with
I will
that.
just say this: it's very disappointing for the Saints, given how they're playing, because that division is wide open. They really should be in it, but something has to change drastically if they want to. Even though they're only a game back of Tampa Bay, it feels like they could be as 5 games back given how they're playing. It's really bad.
Right. When you watch Tampa versus when you watch the Saints, you see kind of two entirely different
I
functioning.
think Tampa is what New Orleans is hoping to be because New Orleans
Right.
has those kind of weapons with Chris Olave, Michael Thomas. You're getting Kamara back after he missed a few games, so you kind of thought that with Derek Carr under center, you could be a competent offense the way Tampa is right now, but it's just not worked out.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. The next game on the slate, uh, like we said with the earlier, Tennessee and Indy being one of the sneaky, really good games on the slate maybe isn't that surprising when you look at the rest of the early slate. But the last game we have on the early slate, we got the Giants at Miami. Miami 12.5 point favorites. I mean, what did you expect? They're just lights out, regardless of not quite showing up against the Bills. They're still absolutely phenomenal. But what you're attacking here is actually the total at 47.5. What are you picking in regards to the game total?
I'm taking the over in this one, and this is one of those situations where you've said all year it takes two to tango. I think the one exception to that is the Miami Dolphins, who, as you unfortunately know, are capable of going over the total single-handedly. I think it could be something similar again this week. The Giants are terrible across the board. They also do not do anything well. I think this could be one of the easiest 40 burgers you're ever going to see in the NFL. What can the Giants do? I mean, you can't. What can you do to stop a healthy Tyreek Hill, a healthy Jalen Waddle, a healthy Raheem Mostert, an emerging Devin Achan who's just torching the league right now, game after game? Unbelievable stuff from him. I mean, easy 40 for Miami, and you just really need 10 to 13 points from the Giants. And I think there will be plenty of opportunities for them to do that, whether it's garbage time or maybe they can find something with their offense. I think Saquon should be back this week, so maybe there's some opportunities there. But honestly, I just don't see how the Giants can do anything of note to stop opposing offenses, especially offenses as good as Miami, who is averaging 37 and a half points per game. That's an insane, insane, insane average. Yeah, and it's only 4 games, but even still, that's insane. Got to take the over in this one. Miami should have their way with them, I think, in this game.
Yeah, and I think even another just added value is just Miami's team total in general.
Yeah.
You're probably gonna be able to shave even a couple of points off of it. Now, granted, odds makers are smart, so it's probably still extremely overvalued or not overvalued. It's probably a very bad odds on an over on depending on where you shop. I mean, we've talked about points bet plenty, but uh you're probably not getting tremendous odds, but they are either juicing the total for them or you're getting a little lower odds. But I think either way, it's going over. So it doesn't really matter because it's free money at the end of the day. So I'm with you too. I like the game total here. I think it's a little more risky because like we talked about, it takes two to tango and 47.5 is not necessarily a small number, but the Dolphins prove continuously that that doesn't seem to matter, that they are a walking bucket, as they say in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just fun to watch, man. And Jalen Waddle is poised for a big one, I think.
Yeah, for
Tyreek
sure.
Hill himself always poised for a big one, but I think Jalen Waddle is due for that really big one that he's, hasn't quite come into yet this season, and he could absolutely go off. And that might be plug for our Discord. That might be one of my props of the week that you can get in the Discord, in our sports betting chat. Anybody that's not in there, go check it out. Importantnonsense.com. Get into our $3 tier. I think it's called, I forget what it's called. Get into our $3 tier. That's how you get into our Discord. You can ask us all the sports betting questions. You can ask the guys all about your fantasy teams, everything your heart could desire. So get in there, ask us the questions. And yeah, I'm right there with you, V. I think, again, not maybe a game we're going to watch a whole lot, but
Nope.
it's going to be easy money.
Yeah.
This game, though, surprisingly, might actually be, it's not going to be great in terms of football, but it might be good in terms of competitiveness and storylines for the season. We have the Cincinnati Bengals, the struggling Cincinnati Bengals heading into Arizona to take on the Cardinals. The Cards are +3 at home. Where are odds makers going where they can continue to lay points with the Cincinnati Bengals on the road? I
It's
don't know
crazy.
what it made sense early on in the season when you're like, yeah, okay, maybe the first couple weeks were a fluke, and they tend to get better as the season goes on. It like we're a month in now. They have played horrendously. I get that they are now have a win, but they have not played well. And the fact of the matter is they continue to be laying points against teams. Now, some of them, Tennessee last week. All right, sure. Maybe that's a question. The Cardinals have played as well as anybody this year. I get that they're 1-3, but has anybody sat there and been like, man, this Cardinals team's getting the first pick like everybody had thought? They are now playing great football. I shouldn't say great, but they're playing way over their heads. They're playing fantastically. And that's why I think both of us are on the side of the +3 here. V, what do you make with this matchup?
Yeah, it's definitely bizarre being able to get the full three in this game. It was even more earlier in the week. It's thankfully, or I mean, not thankfully for us, but I mean, more logically, it's come down closer to three. But you just start with Cincinnati. They're just so banged up. I mean, obviously, I think the number one question in the league right now is Joe Burrow's calf and what this situation is going to turn out, not just in the short term, but in the long term. I think he had some comments earlier in the week that it's getting better every week and he feels good about it. But I think there's just still a lot of fear for fans and people watching is that something serious can happen if they keep putting him out there because he just doesn't have the mobility or the athleticism that we are known to see him having. He just can't evade some of these pressures that are coming up at him because his line is not able to protect him. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be good. It's unfortunately feels like they are risking the short term or they're risking the long term for the short term, and it's just one of those situations where, given where they are and given how difficult their schedule is, I mean, their schedule is brutal. If you take a look at the teams they still have to play, and you're already 1-3, it might just be time to pull the plug, lick your wounds, and just you can get a really really high draft pick next year and then be right back in the Super Bowl contention in 2024. I mean, imagine being able to draft Brock Bowers and just plugging him into this offense because you had one bad year with Joe Burrow's injury. I mean, you're going to be right back into being one of the favorites. But I mean, it's tough right now. They have some other injuries. T. Higgins is questionable with a rib injury. He's not sure if he's going to play. Chidobe Awuzie is questionable. He's their lead corner. I think one of their other corners is also banged up, so they might have to put in their rookie DJ Hall, who had some struggles in the preseason. So their secondary is not looking good. And then Trey Hendrickson was a late addition to the injury report today with a back injury, which is never good. So tons of injuries, and they just have not played well this year. In 4 games this year, Cincinnati has scored 3 offensive touchdowns, 0 in week 1, 2 in week 2, 1 in week 3, and 0 again last week. It's just been brutal to watch. And then on the other side, Joshua Dobbs has been way solid. It's just unbelievable how well he's playing given what we saw from him in Tennessee last year. He's averaging 200 passing yards per game. He has 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. And the Cardinals have been competitive in every game they played in this year. They almost beat the Commanders in week 1. They had that massive lead against the Giants in week 2, upset the Cowboys in week 3. And then last week, they cut the lead to 5 against the unbeatable 49ers with 4 minutes left in the third. So they were right in that game up until the fourth quarter. So this is a good Arizona team that is being well coached. I think they're going to win this game outright, if I'm being honest, because I just don't see how Cincinnati is going to be able to do much of anything.
I agree. I think that this might be the money line play of the week.
Yeah,
Like, this isn't your survivor pool pick by any
definitely
means.
not. If anybody's picking this in a survivor pool, you just torched
No,
whatever
no, no.
money
Yeah,
you paid
you're
to enter.
I know way too many people who are out of every survivor pool they ever play in by week 3 anyway. That's like 75% of like average survivor pool players anyway, fun fact. But another just insane thing here, On the road this season, the Bengals have 6 total points. You can't do
Terrible.
that. You
Yeah.
can't do that. And now you hit the nail on the head. Joe Burrow's calf is the question of the year for pretty much everybody in the football circles. This was a guy that was poised for an MVP potentially.
Hmm.
Now, if they were to now the roster is still good on paper.
Yeah.
And just like you said, if they were to be smart, play Joe Burrow's health, say, "Hey Joe, we're probably going to sit you down here. This season kind of went down the drain quickly and we'd rather not lose you for potentially part of next year as well." Because it's more than people we call it a calf injury. It is a calf injury because it's an Achilles. Like you're testing one of the most crucial pieces of a football player's, you know, health, their Achilles.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he's not he's a quarterback, so he's not terribly, an explosive athlete. Now, Joe's a good athlete, but he's not, you know, running around quite as much. So it's not going to affect him like it would if, say, some wide receiver were to, or poor Trey White, popped his Achilles. Like that could be a really tough break for him because he plays a really athletic position and Achilles tend to be pretty tough on you. So I would play it smart and you put the perfect point. There's never been a better time to have a one-off really high draft pick than it will be in this draft because
Yep.
this draft is looking absolutely loaded to the gills. And I know a lot of people say
Especially on
that every year,
offense. I mean, whether you
but
want to take a lineman or a position player, there's so many guys at the top
everywhere.
that are looking like they could be studs
Right.
right away.
Yeah, a lot of blue chip talent that we're looking at. And, I know that the college season's still young, but there's a lot of potential there in this draft. And if they were smart, they would start doing that.
Yeah, it might be something they look into after they probably lose this week.
You got to keep it on the hush though, because
Yeah,
they're gonna have the tanking people, the abolish the tanking people come out and attack me on Twitter or something.
for sure.
Speaking of, man, I had I wrote a piece not related to these games. I wrote a piece for PFF. I've been writing some stuff for PFF, and it is just so funny the things that people on Twitter will pull out. So I had a blurb on Brian Branch. I love Brian Branch. V, you know me. I've liked watching Brian Branch, and I love this Lions team. I had
Yep.
some I had some Lions folks come out here and absolutely try to skewer me because I said Brian Branch had a slow start to the season. Like, and frankly, sure, Brian didn't have a poor start to the season. The whole team just didn't like quite fire off right at the bat, and then they all caught their stride. Now, unfortunately, he might not play in this week, but it's just so funny. It's just so funny what people tend to pull out. But hey, shout out to them. They just love their team, and I love
Yeah.
them for it. Keep on reading. Mwah. Thank you for your patronage. But anyway, back into the struggle that it is of talking about the Denver Broncos, the Denver Football Broncos. Can I call them that? The Denver Broncos host the New York Jets, and what do we know? I don't know what to make of the Jets anymore because they play pretty well sometimes. And
Yeah.
frankly, Zach
Sometimes.
Wilson wasn't the issue last week.
Nope.
There was that little, blurb of this is the only time that anybody's ever played Patrick Mahomes ever in his career. And I don't know if that's necessarily, I'm not going to go and fact check that. Would say, I would imagine that somebody's outplayed him at some point in some metric, but that's neither here nor there. Zach Wilson didn't play half bad, and they may have lost, but as a team, they looked decently well. They head into Denver to play the Broncos, and the Broncos are 2.5-point favorites. I mean, all right, I guess, but where we're hitting this one, or where you're hitting this one specifically, is one of my tried and true plays of every week, which would be the under on Broncos totals. The total for this one at 43.5. V, what are you seeing with this matchup that keys you to attack this under?
Yeah, it just feels like too many points in this game for me. I'm liking the under 43.5. Broncos have obviously been terrible defensively, the worst defensive team in the league so far through 4 games. But they are hopefully getting some reinforcements back this week. It looks like Frank Clark and Justin Simmons are back for that defense. I think those guys are tremendous players who should help out a great deal for this defense. They're going up against Zach Wilson, who, like you said, was very good last week, had probably his best game as a pro. But it's one game, and given his entire sample size that we've seen over 2+ years, he's not a guy that you can trust it until he does it consistently. Even though Denver's defense is not good, I just don't know if Zach Wilson is a guy who will be able to take advantage of it, drive after drive. Maybe he'll have a couple, nice drives here and there, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be anything consistent for him. But the big key for me in this one is still going to be the Jets defense, which has been fantastic again, as expected this year. They shut down Josh Allen in week 1. He had his worst game of the year. Obviously, he had those 3 interceptions. They only allowed 15 points to New England in week 2. And then last week, they forced Mahomes into one of the worst games he's ever had. So I think this could be a very, very long day for Russell Wilson. They might not break 20 points as a team for Denver. And then I don't know what the Jets are going to do. It could go either way. But in general, I just don't see there being a ton of points on either side. So definitely like the under in this game.
Yeah, the only reason that I kept it off my card, even though traditionally I've really liked these unders, especially just how they've been. Now, the big question, obviously, I think you can say, like the Broncos defense or the Broncos offense has been spectacular, or I shouldn't say spectacular, but they've been very good. They haven't been the issue. Now they might not put up a ton of points, but they're moving the ball decently well. They're starting to get a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more chemistry. Wilson, he's at least playing decently well, especially from a fantasy standpoint. They come up against this Jets defense, who's obviously stacked, top to bottom, tons of playmakers. They're fantastic. My draw that I don't know about is like, what are we going to see a week after this Jets team managed to, I think they put up, what was it? It says it right there, 20. They put up 20 on a pretty good, Chiefs defense. We've talked about this Chiefs defense probably being a little bit more underrated than they're giving
Yeah.
credit for. They scored 20. What are they going to put up against a team like Denver, who is not stopping anybody right now? And that's what scares me, where they could get a backdoor over where, the Jets hit 28, where they just were not expecting. And all of a sudden, the Broncos and the Jets have a shootout that nobody thought would ever happen, which is going to be an interesting thing that I know they're going to be talking about here in the city of Denver for a while. But
Yep.
that's where my biggest draw is. This is actually, but I completely get it. And I think if I'm to put like a percentage of confidence on where it would fall, 43.5 on the under, I can definitely see it, but it's very close there at like 50-50. I don't know how much I would swing both ways, as much as I like unders on Denver. One that I actually really like here, though, which another plug is going to be a prop that you're going to be able to get in the Discord here later. That's going to, hint, wink, wink, might involve the Jets running game taking advantage of the team with the most missed tackles in the league by a wide margin. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, hint, hint. So go into the Discord to get that pick. You're definitely going to want to see that one. The next game we have on the list here, though, is actually going to be a pretty good one, I think.
Yep.
The Kansas City Chiefs, they head into Minnesota to take on the Vikings. They are 3.5-point favorites on the road. You actually got them at 4. They moved a little towards the Vikings. I mean, we're happy with 3.5 too. I will take it wherever we can get it. I'm comfortable at 4 also. You're liking KC here, -4. I'm liking the total on the over at 52, which we'll get into in a second. But what's your breakdown with why everyone should be targeting Kansas City this week?
Yeah, last week's game was tough for those of us who had Kansas City minus whatever they had it at 8.5, 9,
Yeah.
9.5. Despite Patrick Mahomes playing one of the worst games of his career and Zach Wilson playing one of the best, Kansas City still could have covered that big spread if Mahomes just didn't slide at the end. I think that tells you how good this Kansas City team is because they did not play their best football at all last week and still could have dominated this game by double digits. Now Mahomes gets to go up against a Minnesota defense that has allowed 430 plus yards of total offense twice already this season. They did it against the Eagles in week 2, and they did it against the Chargers in week 3. Now you bring in Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Should be a massive day on offense for the Chiefs. The Minnesota defense also just has 3 takeaways on defense for the year, but their offense has turned the ball over 11 times. That is most in the NFL. Minnesota struggled to beat a terrible Carolina team last week. I don't know what that was. They only scored 14 points on offense. They needed a defensive touchdown to take the lead late in the game. I don't think this is a very good Vikings team at all. I'm surprised this number has dropped from whatever it started at, which is close to, I think, 5.5 down to 3.5. I'm not sure where people are seeing value in Minnesota. I just don't think they're going to be able to keep up against a Kansas City team. And I am actually thinking about going the opposite way on the total in this game. I have not decided yet, but I think one of the big reasons I'm leaning towards the under 52.5 in this game is Kansas City's defense has been incredibly good this year. They have allowed opposing offenses to score less than 14 points per game. We just talked about Minnesota struggling against Carolina last week. If they can't score on Carolina, how are you going to score on this Kansas City team that has Chris Jones, Trent McDuffie, and all these talented players on defense? This could be like one of those 28-20 type games that Kansas City covers pretty easily and just narrowly goes under. I think Kansas City would have to do a bulk of the work in this game to hit the total, which they are capable of doing, but could be harder than it might seem on the surface.
Yeah, see, and you're so smart, and every time I hear you talk, it makes me question even myself. But there's one thing that I have in terms of questions with Mahomes this year. So, thanks to our friends over at Pro Football Focus, we have some tools that can measure how well guys play when pressured, specifically
Mm-hmm.
your quarterbacks. Mahomes traditionally the best in the business under pressure, routinely grades out very, very well under pressure, and very, very well when you blitz him. This year hasn't quite been like that against the blitz. He's kind of in the middling range, but he's also the least blitz quarterback in the league for good reason, because he's usually dices it up. He comes against the Vikings, who are by far the heaviest blitzing team in the league, and they mix it up, and they've actually got some pretty good blitzing linebackers. Ivan Pace Jr. has been fantastic blitzing. They're going to queue up some unblocked pressures. And my question is going to be, how well is Mahomes able to answer that right now? Because like we said, traditionally, he's been fantastic. Right now, he's kind of middling. Now, if the Vikings can generate that pressure and off those or generate some sacks off those unblocked pressures, this might be a game where it gets a little bit closer, where like the Kansas City Chiefs are gonna have to continue to push the ball. And that's kind of where I lean towards, because man, as much as like the Vikings have struggled defensively, they have the ultimate cheat code on the outside with JJ. He's just way too good. He might be the best we've ever seen, at least in the last, decade or two, with how well he's been playing, especially how well he's come out this season. And him against McDuffie is going to be is probably one of the matchups of the week,
Mm-hmm.
especially since we probably won't see Micah Parsons versus Trent Williams very often in a game we're going to talk about in a little bit. But this one, man, I can't wait to see that happen. The answer for me, I think, is over, because when you see both of these offenses and what they can do at their peak, I think this one has that potential for the shootout. Uh, 90, I want to say it was somewhere in the 90s that the percent of cash was on this one, which obviously changes as the week goes and more of the public gets in on it. But this is going to be an interesting one to see where it flows towards, at least see where the money flow towards.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm leading towards the over, but I can definitely see what you said too, where, this could be one of those 28-20 games that, Kansas City's kind of become famous for. So
Yeah,
we'll see. It's going to be probably one of the better games of the slate for sure.
for
But
sure.
in the game of the week, without a doubt, where the fact that the Monday game after this is what it is kind of, depressing. But anyway, we get the Dallas Cowboys. They're heading into San Francisco, taking on the Niners, and the Niners are minus 3.5 at home. Game total on this one, 45. And I know I'm going to make some Dallas fans mad, but 3.5 is not enough for a team like the 49ers right now. They are way too good. Now, I understand that the Dallas defense has been fantastic, and them as a total are a really, really good team. But traditionally, the Niners have had their number. And right now, when you look at them on paper, this Cowboys team lost to the Cardinals, while that same Cardinals team, yeah, we talked about it a little bit earlier, they played a good game for 3 quarters. But when it came time to crunch time, that game did not end up that close. They are this Niners team is without a doubt the best team in the NFC, and they are probably the best team in the NFL right now. Defensively stacked across the board, the offense well run. Now, my biggest question in this one, which, my guy Steve Palazzolo over at PFF, he brought up this great point, which I entirely agree with, and which we've kind of talked about on the show previously when referring to these Niners, is that Brock Purdy's ability to keep the ball in his hand and his turnover luck has been tremendous for them, and probably a reason why this team has looked as well as they have on offense. Just one play. We talked about the one where George Kittle did the strap because he had a pass breakup that was a straight pass to a DB that's not covering anybody. But another play that comes to mind is in week 1 when Brock Purdy holds onto the ball behind his back. Like, that doesn't happen. Those are
Right.
turnovers 9 times out of 10. So he's getting this turnover luck, and that's not necessarily a great draw when you come up against one of the most opportunistic defenses in the league. With Dallas, they have 7 picks. They have 2 more that they've dropped. With all that being said, I don't know if the one turnover or the, maybe big play defensively is going to be enough for this Cowboys team to overcome the juggernaut that is the San Francisco 49ers. Christian McCaffrey playing way too good of football. You look at Kittle, he's continually consistent. Debo didn't have a great week last week, but we know what he can do, and he's already popped off in games. And that's just talking about the offense, not even leading into the insane defense that they have with defensive players of the year. They have Fred Warner. Every single piece of this team is kind of key for a really deep playoff run. And right now, I think, as much as the Cowboys are a good test for them, it is still only a test. So, what do you make of anything of this game, V? I know you don't necessarily have a pick in this one, which is kind of nice when you get these great matchups. We get to just watch
Yeah.
them. But do you have any read on this one?
Yeah, this is a game that I am expecting to eventually add the 49ers minus 3.5 to my card. I'm just waiting to see some more injury news out of this game. I didn't see anything earlier today, so I'm just waiting on that. If we find out that Dallas is still dealing with injuries on their offensive line, this is an easy smash on the 49ers because, like you said, that front seven for San Francisco is incredible. And if you don't have your guys up front healthy, it's going to be an extremely long day for Dak Prescott. And this is a huge test, mainly for the Cowboys, I think, because 3 of their 4 games this year, they have just rolled teams. Their defense has been so good, so their offense has not had to do anything. It's been just like a walk in the park for Prescott on that offense. But the one time where they needed their offense to step up in Arizona, they could not do it. So this is not a team so far this year that has proven that they can play from behind, and that could be a situation they're in this week. The only concern you have for San Francisco is, can Micah Parsons do what he does and become that one game wrecking machine against Brock Purdy, who has, he has been great, but he has not played against somebody like Parsons yet this year. And he is definitely one of those guys that can just hassle you and ravage you for 4 quarters straight. This could be a 4-sack, 5-sack game for Parsons. He can just wreak havoc. He can do what TJ Watt has done countless times, or Myles Garrett has done countless times, cause a couple turnovers. If I think that's like really the only way the Cowboys can stay in this game. But yeah, everything right now is pointing towards the 49ers, and definitely keep an eye out for the injury report. If they're still missing Tyron Smith, if they're still missing Zach Martin in this game, you just have to take the 49ers. 3.5 is not high enough in that instance.
I think you know what. So I've been writing the PFF preview of the week for Marcus Mosher is actually the guy who usually writes that, and he also covers the Cowboys, and so I've actually been a little plugged in with that O
Okay.
line news. Apparently, they're projecting all five back for the first
Oh, nice.
time ever. They're going to have all five back. At least that's how it's looking. I still think though that your question on that is valid because we haven't seen these guys play. A lot of offensive line play comes down to chemistry. If they're not, super intact and super in lockstep, that could create an issue. Additionally, who knows how much rust any of these guys have coming off. So yes, these questions continue, or these injury questions continue to be, and I teased at it just a second ago. As much as it would be the player matchup of the week to see Trent Williams take on Micah Parsons, it's just not going to happen. I mean, it might happen. It's going to happen on some plays, and those are going to be awesome plays. But the Cowboys are too smart to just sit there and push Parsons at the best tackle of the last decade, probably. So you're going to see Parsons do what he does, probably from the right side of the offense. He's going to stunt a lot. He's going to move around. He's probably going to take some A-gap blitzes, things like that. What the Cowboys have done effectively with him, since moving him to full-time pass rush. So it's going to be another good one to watch. Frankly, I still don't know that anything, and like you said, I still
Yeah.
don't know that anything that the Cowboys can do offensively is going to be enough to keep up with this juggernaut on both sides of the ball, which is the 49ers. So shout out Kyle Shanahan.
Yep.
The next game on the slate, Monday Night Football. Unfortunately, not quite as interesting of a game, but an opportunity to make money nonetheless, especially at the end of the week. So we have the Packers heading into Vegas to take on the Raiders. It looks like this game is about 1.5 in favor of the Raiders at home, 45 or 44.5 on the total here. We're actually on both the line and the total. You are on Green Bay at +1. I'm leaning on the side of the under at 45.5. What are you seeing with the Packers that actually encourages you for them on the road this week? Or is this more a kind of a move away from the Raiders?
Yeah, this is definitely a move away from the Raiders spot. But we can start with Green Bay. Their offense has not been great since their explosion in week one, where they had 38 points. In the 3 weeks since then, they have averaged less than 21 points per game. They struggled last week in Detroit on Thursday night, mainly because their O line was incredibly banged up, and Detroit's defensive line just kind of went to town and pressured Jordan Love all night. But now they're going up against a Raiders defense that just doesn't have the guys to replicate that kind of success along the defensive line outside of Max Crosby. The Raiders have the third lowest pressure rate in the league this year. The Raiders defense ranks in the bottom 10 in points per game allowed so far, and they have just one takeaway in 4 games. It's not great. The defense, again, it's just been a theme every single year. They don't do anything well whatsoever. For the Raiders, Jimmy G has cleared the concussion protocol and he will be starting in this game. I think that is why you have seen the line shift a little bit in the Raiders' favor. But Jimmy G has not been good when he's played this year. He has 5 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in 3 games. Green Bay's defense has given up just 4 passing touchdowns this year. The only silver lining for the Raiders in this game is that Green Bay struggles against the run. They are allowing 155 rushing yards per game, which is third most in the league. So this could be a very nice Josh Jacobs day, but I just don't trust Garoppolo at all to get to win a game right now. He just doesn't look good, doesn't look comfortable. Green Bay has a ton of talent on defense. I think they're going to be able to completely shut him down. And Jordan Love has been good enough to give Green Bay the win in this game. And what I agree would probably be a low scoring game. So I definitely like your play on the under in this one.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. And when you look at it, it's it's one of these ones again where it's like we can analyze games and oddsmakers can analyze games until we're blue in the face. But when it comes down to it, sometimes the math just doesn't make any sense. The
Mm-hmm.
Raiders have failed to reach 20 points every game this year. Where are we getting 45 from? Now, I
Yep.
get that the Packers have been probably a little bit better, but they've also had some injury issues too. And Aaron Jones is struggles with his hammy. He looked really bad. Their run game is not it right now, which is a
Nope.
huge issue considering that that's what they were hoping to lean on when they were like, yeah, we're wheeling out Jordan Love. Because I don't know that you can continue to just throw the ball around with Jordan Love every single, outing. So it's going to be an interesting draw. Now, you hit the nail on the head too with this Raiders defense that they don't get any pressure outside of Max Crosby, who owns the single season pressure record for PFF and is on pace to break that. He's got, let me see how many he's got. He's got 30 total pressures in 4 games. Like, get
Jeez,
out.
that's
He's
insane.
got like, I don't even know the percentage right off the top of my head, but he has a huge percentage of their total pressures on the season. It might even, I'm pretty sure it's over 50%. So this is just going to be one where, sorry guys, Monday, you're going to be able to get your laundry done on Monday. That's all I'll say. So, I wouldn't worry about that too much. Under 45 just makes too much sense. And before I get too far, shout out Pedrito, appreciate you. We love seeing you back here. Hopefully we're making some money. V, actually, I was paying attention. That's actually our last breakdown here. So we can close that. But V, I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing this year. V, last week we killed it. We had a great week last week, and we have been doing really, really well. For anybody that wants to see how myself or Vishaal are doing, I posted a little screen cap of our record after last week. And I have the pictures, and I mean to post them before the show of our records this week, but we're just moving up. 16% return on investment for the both of us, over 65% win rate. We're up huge units on the year. And that's also with a lot of these money lines that we've been taking through the Betting Pros app, where traditionally we don't always take those, and those can add more fluctuation to your units, especially if you like take a big time winner and they end up losing like 3 units for you. Like that can really be struggle. But we've been killing money lines. I'd love to say I know exactly where we're ranked, but Betting Pros for some reason has decided that they don't care where people rank anymore. Which that's okay. I can say that now because I don't think we're affiliated with Betting Pros anymore. But I do still like Betting Pros. We use Betting Pros all the time. So shout out to Betting Pros. But Betting Pros, bring back the uh the pros rankings, the
Yeah.
professional rankings and the public rankings, so we can like figure that out, because I don't know any of the people that you guys are ranking right now. So frankly, all right. But anyway, so that about wraps us for week 5V. We are back same time next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here. YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, all those good things. You can also hit us up, importantnonsense.com. That's how you get all of the IN teams work: betting, fantasy, DFS, guillotine. You can also become a member, and that's how you get into our Discord. Like I said earlier, hit the $3 tier. You can get in there, ask us any of your betting questions. If we didn't hit the game that you wanted us to talk about, or any of the bets you're interested in, hit us up in there. We're happy to talk them up, talk to you about them. Also, that's where we put a lot of our money lines in there, our player props, any other bets we're really liking. I had a great teaser that I loved a couple weeks ago fall through. I might hit another teaser this week, V. Who knows? We'll get crafty. So definitely get in there. Also, you can get all your IN merch over at the website too. Promo code LOCK if you want to do that. We would definitely appreciate you. But yeah, that about does it, V. Another great week breaking it down with you, buddy. Do you have any parting words for the people at home?
Enjoy the week, and just like you said, Mason, please come into the Discord. I know you have a couple prop picks that you talked about that are going to be in there. I also have one that I'm going to be putting in there that we did not get to today from the Eagles Rams game. One of the quarterbacks I really like, so jump in there to find out who it is. I think that's going to be a really good game too. We didn't cover it, but should be an entertaining one. So yeah, definitely come in there, check out everything we got, and yeah, make some money along with us. It should be a fun week.
It's going to be a good one. I can't wait. Can't wait till it kicks off. Until next time, everybody. Good night. Good luck.